Hello everyone and welcome back to EXA Season 9 Division 2 Round 6. We are here at the Autodromo Dino Ferrari for the Emilia Romagna Grand Prix in Imola. The 3-mile circuit contains 19 turns, 10 to the left and 9 to the right, with a single DRS zone down the main straight completing the circuit. The circuit first hosted an F1 race back in 1980 as the Italian Grand Prix before moving to become the San Marino Grand Prix from 1981 until 2006, which saw winners like Prost, Piquet, Mansell, Senna, Schumacher, Hill and Alonso throughout those years before it had a hiatus on the calendar. It would then return to become in 2020 to become the Emilia Romagna Grand Prix, which saw Lewis Hamilton take that win on its return before Max Verstappen won the next 4 consecutive Grand Prix between 2021 and 2025. I'm your commentator, Jamie Jackson, and I'll be taking you through proceedings tonight as we get into today's race. But we've got some things to discuss first. Last time out, we had a sprint race in Austria. We saw Nello Safu take the sprint win ahead of Sausage Joe and AMS Knight. Zoran, Adam and Bran would finish 4th, 5th and 6th just behind them, with Rio Harris, Fira Attis, Marcel and Aidan rounding out the top 10 in the sprint. This leaves us as well in the race with the race results, with Nello Safu taking victory there as well in maximising their possible points gained, with Sausage Joe and Zoran finished 2nd and 3rd, ahead of AMS Knight, Bran, Flores, Archer, Adam, Louis Wainwright, Fira Attis rounding out that top 10. This leaves us with the drivers' standings and AMS Knight with a 35-point lead over Sausage Joe, who sits in 2nd place, just a single point ahead of both the Ferraris of Nelly Safu and Zoran, as those hit 174 and 2 sets of 73 points respectively. On 60 points, you see Bran ahead of Flores and Adam in 6th and 7th, with Oliver in 8th. Reese Brooks and Raven West will round out the top 10, but there's still a long way to go in this season. And with the points settled in between Sausage Joe, Nelly Safu and Zoran in 2nd, 3rd and 4th, and AMS Knight not here tonight, it could be a very, very interesting race for them. We have got a ping, but with that in mind, we've got we've got the constructor standings as well. Ferrari lead that by 19 points over the Kick Sauber squad, ahead of the Red Bull squad by a further 27 points in P3. RB and Williams are in 4th and 5th, ahead of Aston Martin, Alpine, Mercedes, and then McLaren, and then Haas, as the constructors, like they have since the early rounds, has continued to score quite good points, even at the lower end of the field. But with that in mind, we've got a race to contest. We're qualifying as well, actually, is currently up. We've got 10 drivers who have set a time. Zoran currently, so ahead of Vigo and Nelu Safu. And then we've got Strikey and Rio Harris in 4th and 5th. A couple drivers still yet to set a lap. Fantasy is currently one of them going slowly in around the circuit. I'm not sure why. It was helpful to remember my buttons to actually get this. He's going to go and start a flying lap, I think, as he gets ready to go very slowly around this circuit, and he's going. That is extremely slow for the Aston Martin, but he'll probably get going soon as he starts to build up the speed now to get himself ready for a flying lap. We'll stay on board with Fantasy throughout this whole lap, see what he can do as we go down towards the final final little turn in the straight. It's not really a straight, this one. It's a lot of bends around this, down this pit straight. In that, it's not really a straight. A load of curves. We go into turn 1 and turn 2. Mounts the curves quite nicely before going into turn 3. Down towards turn 4 and 5 is up next. Well, actually 5 and 6, sorry, is up next. As we go into left and right. Keeps it nicely on the curves. It's currently 24-1 in the first sector. 2 tenths down on what they did in their last run before backing off. Can the Aston Martin get the improvements necessary to put themselves in up amongst that top end of the field? Never mind, they decided to back out themselves again. So I wonder if that was because they are going to run out of fuel and maybe not make it round to the next end of the lap. So we're going to go back to the McLaren. Who's next on circuit? It will be Dion who is currently on a lap 23.9 in the first sector. A very, very solid first sector from the Mercedes driver as we go down through sector 2 now, down towards Emilia Romagna. Sorry, I think it's Imola, yeah. As we go up towards the rest to end sector 2, up the hill now, down towards the final chicane of the lap. And it does that, mounts them curves quite nicely over the first 2 chicanes. Now up towards the final couple corners, where this is a very true test of just how far you're willing to go as you go into the 2 Ravazzas, into the final corner. Do you have enough grip left that you've left in your tyres from the early parts of the lap? Up towards the line, where you go with the Mercedes, it is a 15.5 from the Silver Arrow. But they can still very much improve on that. 2 seconds though between them and Zoran. I wonder how much time they can potentially gain. CWL will be the next driver who hasn't set a lap to cross the line, I believe. As we get is the Haas driver goes into the chicane. Can they manage to put the lap together as we go up towards the final couple of corners now, down towards through turn 16, complete flat there before we go into the braking zone of the 2 Ravazzas. Into the turn 17, very wide there, and just goes off the circuit, invalidating their lap time. That is very unfortunate there for the Haas, and that puts them straight into a big issue area, because they all of a sudden they have not got that banker time on the board, and they have to go now with probably maybe a single lap or a double lap on the same set of tyres. So meaning they might not get to optimise their lap time, and also they're not going to be too confident at this stage. Meanwhile, we're going to have Nelu Safu, who's currently on the lap, not improving at this stage. Vigo is going to go around the final couple of corners. Can the RB improve upon their lap time? Gets very close to that white line, skirting it before we go down towards the final corner. 13.4 as we cross the line. A very good lap there, half a tenth quicker than Zoran. As we go down towards the second half of the session, actually down towards the final third of the session, if anything, yeah, final third of the session, and it is very, very close. Scott, next up is a couple drivers like Sausage Joe, where's the button? Sausage Joe, who's currently not going to go improving on that lap. So I wonder if it is one of the Red Bulls. JB 51 is not improving. They've currently invalidated. So it's going to now be Striker who's going to be the next driver to cross the line. Can the V carb? No, they've decided to go into pits after going onto the grass. And that's a bit frustrating there for Striker. But we continue on. They continue on at least with their car intact, and not a, if anything, not a massive error to contest with. Meeks goes up to P10 now for 15.3, jumping ahead of Dion, if that lap time the Williams does. As the next driver to cross the line will be potentially the Red Bull of Noah, maybe? Yeah, Noah going through the chicane 2.4 seconds down, so that is not quite what you want to be seeing if you are the Red Bull, currently sat in P9. A fair way off of the top end of the leaderboard, but we'll see whether Noah can manage to put a better sort of lap in. They're going to probably come into pits to get a fresh set of tyres, and then they will be going on to their final run of the session very shortly. Next up will be the Aston Martin of Fantasy, who will be trying to set another lap, who's just gone around for that lap. We're going to stay with Fantasy across this lap as we go through towards the first, well, this technically, that's technically the first corner there. As we then go down towards turn 2, 3 and 4 of Variante Tamburello into 3 and 4. Looks a bit shaky on the curve, on the exit of the curbing, however manages to keep it there. It has to cut back out of there a little bit, does not quite have the right line through Villeneuve, however has managed to keep it in the white lines. That's crucial. Through Tosa looks okay before we going up to Piratella of turn 9, and again it looks like he needs to be a bit more conservative. Has wasted a lot of that ERS early on, will not be able to use too much of it throughout the rest of the lap. Down through Aquaman Raleigh, looked a lot cleaner through there this time round as we go up towards Variante Outer. As across the chicane, bounce across that first curb and gets a massive load of oversteer, and I thought he was going to catch that, not quite. but the Aston Martin keeps out the wall. But that is going to be significantly confidence dent in there for Fantasy, who just could not quite get the lap in, and that chicane ultimately costing them even a chance of getting a competitive time in. Next up will be CWL Racing, who is currently on a flying lap as we go down towards the two Ravazzas into the final chicanes. They're not improving either, so we will probably see them peel off into the pits. Yep, who is next across the line? It will be the Mercedes of WL Racing, maybe, if not Dion. It's WL Racing, who's currently invalidated, and then it will be Dion, who's currently 4.3 seconds down. So our next time to run will be from Immortal Raider in the Alpine, who is yet to set a time. And they're about to start their flying lap as we go down towards the first chicane, and down towards Tamburello, as we see the rest of the drivers filing out the pits now. Immortal Raider has an opportunity here to at least go for a lap, a second run, another run, if there is any form of major error from the Alpine, but they've kind of left themselves in a tight gap here because they haven't given themselves much time. They go across the gravel, dragging gravel onto the circuit. Very, very lucky not to get invalidation there. Are they going to back out? Are they going to continue on? The Alpine are not going to be quite happy with that lap. As we go up towards for the next couple of corners, they are, in fact, I think, harvesting through here. Yes, they are. So we're going to see the Alpine go for another flying lap instead. It'll be WL Raider, who I think will be, not WL Raider, it's just WL9317, who's going to go through and complete the next flying lap. We're going to go down towards 51.0 into the first two sectors combined. Now, through the final chicane, down towards the Ravazzas we go. Through the final couple of corners. There's a lot of corners here that aren't actual corners, and then there's corners that you'd think there'd be actual named corners, but they're not. As the Mercedes now goes through the two Ravazzas, gets a bit of dirty air off the Alpine in front as they go up towards the line. They just they almost go into that barrier there. They really misjudged their turn in there, and that almost cost them. As we now see the Ferrari go flying by. Next up will be the Mercedes of Dion, who goes on to start their flying lap. And the next Red Bull, it will be going across the line, will be not a JJB51, it'll be Noah who's next across the line. So Zoran is on a flying lap, will stay on with the Ferrari, currently P3 in the standings, so P4 in the standings, tied with their teammate Nelu Safu. They have the opportunity there today to catch back up to AMS Knights today, who is not here. Big points are on offer, and the opportunity to revive their championship hunt for both Ferraris, as well as who else was it? Sausage Joe, who's currently P2 and the reserve. I was trying to find his last week's car, the McLaren. He's currently in P6. So opportunity for all three drivers, who are separated by just a single point, to catch the 35-point gap between them and the championship leader Zoran through the final couple of corners. Up towards the line does go the Scuderia. What time does he set? A 13.3. Goes just a tenth quicker than Vigo. Can the V-Carb top that? They're currently invalidated, so that's a definite no. Nelu Safu will be the next driver who could be in contention right now. Rio Harris goes with a 13.8. That puts himself P4 ahead of Strikey for now. But Nelu Safu is on a charge, currently P3. Can they go faster than their teammate? As we go through the final couple of corners into the Ravazzas, does the Ferrari manage to nail the lap? We go up towards the line. What time does the Scuderia do? It's 13.7. Only goes a couple hundreds quickest, remains in P3, and that looks like it might be solidified for the Ferrari, unless Strikey can do anything about it. Strikey currently in P5, 14.0. The only driver currently up on their time who is in contention. That's now a 10th down in sector 2, and this could be make or break this final sector here to potentially at least gain time and gain position. Jump Rio Harris and Nelu Safu, potentially Vigo, or maybe get pole, but they need to gain enough time through these final couple chicanes, and no, they've decided to back out of that one, and that is qualifying over. AMS Zoran has taken pole position at Imola, ahead of Vigo, ahead of Nelu Safi, Rio Harris, Strikey, Sausage Joe, AMS are washed. Noah, JJB51 and Meeks will round out the top 10. Dion, Immortal Raider, WL9317, Fantasy and CWL Racing will be our rest of the grid, but it's certainly going to be an exciting race. A 5-second time, a 5-place grid penalty for Immortal Raider will send him back to the grid for a collision with Nelu Safu. I'm not exactly sure what happened there, as I think Nelu was on in lap. Yeah, there was a collision there, so that is a 5-place to the Alpine, and that is going to send them to the back of the grid. We've now got a race on our hands. Qualifying is over. AMS Zoran is on top ahead of Vigo and Nelu Safu. The championship is an opportunity. This is an opportunity for them to catch the championship leader, or at least gain some ground. But if with the race being with the championship lead being in Knight's favour, no matter what happens here tonight, the Sauber will see his championship lead potentially be cut significantly into by any of them three drivers. In the meantime, we're going to have a little break. We've got an opportunity to see all the drivers in action very shortly, but we'll be back in just a moment. Ladies and gentlemen, we are back for the formation lap as we are about to get underway. Zoran will lead the way out of Vigo, Nelu Safu, Rio Harris, Strikey, Sausage Joe, AMR washed, Noah, JJB51 and Meeks are our top 10. The two Mercedes of Dion and WL9317 and are in 11th for 12th, while Fantasy, CWL Racing and Immortal Raider round out our grid. Immortal Raider got a 5-place grid penalty, sending him to the back of the grid. Collision with Nelu Safu in qualifying, but the strategy is going to be an interesting one, I believe, because while we have everyone starting on mediums, we will probably see a couple stops here today if people cannot extend their tyres. Fantasy is the only person who's gone different to everyone else to start the race on the hard compound tyres, but they are going to see what they can do. with the long-term pace of those hards and try and come out later in the race with a bit of clean air and a bit of a better tyre. With that in mind, we've got a 31 lap race, 32 maybe? No, yeah, 31, 32 lap race ahead of us. And the Ferrari has got Zoran has got some very tight competition up front, but can any of them gain significant amounts on AMS night by the end of it? Formation lap is coming to an end, but there is some significant gaps between Zoran and the back of the field. This has ultimately left people scrambling to try and get some tyre warmth before the end of their lap, because they all of a sudden realise it's a massive gap, because I don't exactly know what happened to Immortal Raider, who has actually ended up quite far down the order. So we'll see whether that makes a difference. We're going to end up with a very bad camera angle to start this Grand Prix. So we're going to look from the rear view of the drivers and see what they can do and come out on top. The last drivers are coming into the start grid boxes now as we're going to get ready. As actually, never mind, we actually get a good start camera. We're now going to go to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 red lights for the Emilia Romagna Grand Prix. And it's go, go, go for Zoran and Vigo. Zoran, Vigo, side by side, down towards the first chicane. Vigo got a bit of a better start. Then Zoran, who was on the outside. Vigo's going to swoop round the outside potentially of Zoran. Zoran tries to defend it, pushing wide. There's a Williams off in the gravel. But Vigo manages to take the lead ahead of Zoran. Nelu Sapi's going to apply pressure to his teammate, but not quite at this stage as we go through the second chicane. It is currently the RB of Vigo ahead of the two Ferraris and his teammate of Strikey. That is our top four. Rio Harris has just dropped behind Strikey into P5. Sausage Joe remains in P6. Wash is down to P13. Meeks is down to P15. There's a bit of spread back there between the drivers. But we now go through Variante, through Aquamilarale, sorry, and up towards Variante Alta. We've got a long race to go in this one. But Vigo has put the move on the Ferrari straight away in this race as we go down towards the final couple of corners of the two Ravazzas. Can Vigo stay ahead of AMS Zoran, who have pulled a little bit of a gap to Nelu Safu? Strikey is trying to pressurise the second Ferrari, but it looks like it's going to be VCAR v the Scuderia for this race win as we go down towards the first chicane of Tamburello. Can Zoran put any sort of pressure on Vigo into the first chicane? Not quite. There's still a couple car lengths back before we head into the braking point. Vigo looks to have a little bit more comfort at the start, and now it's going to start to be applied pressure upon Zoran, as Zoran has warmed up their tyres that little bit more now. They had been sat on the grid for a little while, so that maybe played a factor to these two's starts. It kept it all very close between the top few positions. Vigo looking to defend as we go into Piratella and down towards Aquamilarale once more. Can Zoran get by? Not quite at this stage. Meanwhile, there's a bit of battling there between Fantasy and CWL Racing. Fantasy just lost the position to the Haas, who moves up to 8th place. CWL doing a fantastic move on the exit of Piratella and down towards the Aquamilarale double right-hander. As the Haas is now setting their sights upon Noah. Meanwhile, Vigo, AMS Zoran, going to go down towards Ravazzas together as we go on to the end of lap 2 to start lap 3. Can the Ferrari get by Vigo? We're going to go down towards turn 1, not even sensing it in the modern Formula 1 cars, down towards the first chicane. Zoran around the outside takes the lead on DRS and gets by before the braking point, gets ahead of Vigo, who now gets a nice hefty lump of dirty air from the back of that Ferrari as the VCARB now needs to just set themselves up for the rest of this race and try and get back ahead of the Ferrari, who clearly has very good pace in these early phases as well, despite dropping back off the start. We're now going to go up towards Piratella. Nelu Safu is starting to put some pressure on the VCARB in front as well, so this is not the best opportunity for the RB as we go through and up towards Aquamilarale. The VCARB needs to just settle back in to the race AMR Wash has just got past Meeks, who has spun on the exit of Tosa, and this is not that has not been a good start for the Williams. Off at the gravel in the first lap in the first chicane, and then off spun round, I believe, again on the exit of Tosa on lap 3. The Williams have got some work to do to get back towards the front. We're now going to go on to lap 4. The Alpine of Immortal Raider has also spun on the exit of Variante Alta. But we're going to keep on the eye on this battle for the lead. Currently 10 drivers, the whole top 10 is in this battle in theory. But JB51 and Fantasy are starting to drop back from the group. CWL Racing keeping in touch with the DRS, but the rest of the field remaining ever so close despite the dirty air. We're going to go through Tosa now. The V-Carb is going to put some more pressure on Zoran, despite the Ferrari pulling away initially after that DRS pass. Can the Ferrari continue to keep that defence up, or will Vigo go back to the race lead? Remember, Zoran, Nelu, Safu and Sausage Joe need to maximise here tonight to try and gain many points on AMS Knight, who had a very dominant start to the season in comparison, and has managed to build up a points gap that has allowed them to miss a race and still maintain that championship lead. Meanwhile, JJB51 has spun on the exit of Aquamilla Raleigh, and the Red Bull is very much now dropped back down the order. Still in P10 though, still got a long way to go. We're back now towards the front of the field. We see Nelu Safu and is trying to catch Vigo, who is also trying to catch Zoran. This DRS train is going to become not much train much longer, because it's going to have 2 heads at the front. Vigo goes to the lead, takes the inside line. Zoran tries to defend to the outside to try and get much later braking, but the Ferrari unable to contest as Vigo retakes that lead. It's going to be a bit more like that throughout the race, but it's going to be who makes that first major error between the two. We've currently got V-Carb, Ferrari, V-Carb, Alpine as our top 5. They're starting to pull away from Sausage Joe in P6, who does not look as comfortable at this stage, but he's still within that DRS window at least. We're now going to go down towards Aquamilla Raleigh, the top 5 remaining line astern, compared to where they were only a couple corners earlier, but they are trying everything they possibly can to either put major amounts of pressure on the car in front to force them into errors to make their moves. So Rio Harris needs to get some moves done, while Strikey is made some form of error, because Rio Harris is now going to be much closer to the RB than the RB is to the Ferraris in front. Is this the opportunity the Alpine needs to get ahead of the V-Carb? Meanwhile, his teammate of Immortal Raider has spun off on the exit of the Tamburello chicane. They're going to get back underway potentially, I'm not quite sure, but the yellow flags are going to start coming into play here. Meanwhile, Nelu Safu, AMS Zoran and Vigo in the reverse order are going to be trying to fight each other. They got very, very close on the entry into the chicane, but nothing happening there quite yet. Yellow flags for Immortal Raider, which is really shocking at this stage, but Vigo, AMS Vigo is just managing to get by that without any loss of focus, without any loss of control. But Rio Harris is actually making a move here. Up the around the outside goes Rio Harris. Took it on the exit of Piratella and made the move stick on the entry into Aquamilla Raleigh. Excellent move there from Rio Harris. Gets right ahead of Strikey. And now Rio has moved his way up to P4 as Strikey looks to try and strike it back. But he can't do anything at this stage, because the Alpine's pace does look to be supreme. But we're going to go down towards the final couple of corners to end lap 6. Start lap 7. Vigo will lead the way once more ahead of Zoran, but Zoran's not going to give this one up. Green flag flies once more after the pitting of Dion, who retires in the pit lane. Here we go, round the outside goes Zoran. Can he make the move stick? Yes, he does. Vigo drops down to P2, Zoran up to P1, and that is the opportunity for the Scuderia, who has gained a little bit of a gap over their the teammate of Nelu Safu. Just under 7 tenths between the top 2 and Nelu Safu, though. DRS and Slipstream will certainly help that close back up, but it is not over until it's over, because this top 8 are still very, very close. We now go down towards Piratella, towards Aquamilorale. It is Zoran, it is Vigo, it is Nelu Safu, it is Rio Harris, and it is Strikey. Rio Harris, I wonder if Rio is streaming, I'd love to see that move back on later on, because that was a phenomenal effort there to get that move done. There's a yellow flag at the first chicane. I wonder, oh no, it's just a couple drivers have retired of Meeks, Immortal Raider and Dion, leaving us with just 12 drivers in this session. I thought there was another spinner, but we're going to continue on now. Zoran leads the way ahead of Vigo by 8.5 tenths. At the moment it is going to be battle on between these drivers, because none of them want to lose out on any number of points here today. That is the matter at hand. You've got the opportunity to take a significant advantage out of your rivals. Meanwhile, Sausage Joe's gone off. Sausage Joe has gone off at Tamburello, dropped down to P8, and that is our second place driver in the championship, dropping out of position. It is unfortunate there for the McLaren, who now has to get back into a rhythm, but is now behind Noah and CWL Racing, leaving the top 5 to fight it out themselves. Noah and CWL have dropped off the back of that queue as well, so it's now opportunity for Sausage Joe to have to get back by 2 drivers and then go again and push harder to catch up to that top 5 position. Zoran, Vigo, Nelu Safa, Rio Harris and Strikey remain as our top 5, but the gaps are beginning to form a little bit more now in comparison to the opening couple of laps, but they are still within that DRS window. Or for how long, because Rio Harris has just about dropped out of that, maybe survives it because of the DRS detection zone is a little bit before that, but Rio Harris might have to get the pedal down. He does have DRS, but he's going to need some fighting between the top 3 if there's anything that's going to happen. Strikey comes into the pit lane, becomes the first of the front runners to make a pit stop. Meanwhile, CWL Racing makes a move ahead of Noah into P5, and Noah looks to maybe try and get the position back, but can't do anything. He maybe has pushed his tyres a little bit too hard in comparison to the Haas, but the Haas is going to try and push themselves to the limit. Meanwhile, Sausage Joe in the McLaren is going to try and make some form of move stick on Noah quickly and efficiently, because they need to go after that top group once more. CWL Racing took a couple laps to get by the Red Bull, but McLaren needs to do that a lot quicker if he wants any opportunity to stay in the fight for the win. We've now gone onto lap 9. Massive slap of oversteer there from the Red Bull. That's going to allow the McLaren to fly by Sausage Joe moves up to P6. That's the opportunity the McLaren needed to get past quickly and efficiently, but they are now going to get DRS by Noah, who is going to try and get that position back as quickly as possible. But the McLaren has got quite good pace. They're going to go into the Ravatas now, just outside of DRS, and unfortunately they will not be able to get that DRS. Even though they are in a second window now, they're going to have to continue to defend. Noah goes into the pit lane. Sausage Joe is pushing like hell. Meanwhile, Vigo's gone back to the race lead ahead of Zoran. Vigo has jumped into the lead. Zoran is going to try and make the move back as Zoran looks to try to get a better run, but can't do so as we go into the Villeneuve chicane and up towards Tosa. Vigo looks to lead ahead of Zoran. These two continue to swap places every couple of laps. Meanwhile, Rio Harris right on the back of the Ferrari of Nelu Safu. Rio is trying to push. Maybe he has got better tyre wear than the cars in front. Rio, our Division 3 champion last season, is on the back of 2 championship contenders, and Vigo, I believe, has won in a couple of times now in EXA. I'm not as certain on some people's history, but Rio is someone who is to watch out for throughout the rest of this season and into the future. We're going to go into the final couple of corners into Ravatsas now. Vigo leads the way ahead of AMS Zoran, ahead of Nelu Safu, but is that going to last long? Because AMS Zoran is going to try and take the lead back from Vigo. As we go to the inside, he'll have to potentially go for the move, but decides not to do it. Sits back a little bit behind the V-Carb for now and keeps the position. Sausage Joe moves up ahead of CWL Racing and back up into P5 at 2.5 second gap. He will now have to regain upon, but it is not over quite yet for the McLaren. They've done what they needed to after that mistake, but they need to still gain a couple of seconds to put themselves back in the fight. We are on lap 11 of 32. Vigo leads the way ahead of Zoran and Nelu Safu. We are over a third of the way into this race, and the top four look to be in a battle. Meanwhile, Nelu Safu maybe have made a mistake because Rio Harris is right on the back of the Ferrari, who is being pushed along by the Alpine. Rio is going to try and get this move done. It looks like the Alpine has the ultimate pace, but can Rio get by as the Scuderia starts to squander and try and squabble with their own car? The Alpine continues right up the chuff of the Ferrari, but we've also got to keep an eye on the battle for the lead. Rio gonna have try harder to get by Nelu Safu, who has the DRS on his teammate no less, as Nelu Safu has managed to keep P3 for the time being, but with the mistakes creeping in, Rio could potentially pounce soon. We go back to the battle for P7 now, as Fantasy will have to defend from Strikey. Strikey, who's already made a pit stop, will go up the inside into the first chicane, gets the move done on Fantasy and moves up to P7 in a very good job from him. The Red Bull of, I think that is JB51, who's gone off at the Ravazzas, and hopefully they can get going. Never mind, they've been disqualified for being parked in a dangerous location. The race continues on now as the top four continue to squabble, and actually Sausage Joe is slowly but surely catching that lead four, but for how long can they keep that pace up for? They've got to be careful of the Red Bull, which is slowly making its way back to the track. I wonder what happened with the Red Bull, who's been disqualified from the race. Continuing on now, Zoran and Rio Harris jump into the pit lane. Where will they come out in comparison to Strikey, who pitted a couple laps earlier? Nelu Safu will move to second. Vigo will maintain first. Sausage Joe will move up to third. It'll be interesting to see whether the where Zoran and Rio Harris come out in comparison to Strikey, who is coming down the main straight now and comes out well clear of the two Ferrari and the Alpine. But crucially, they've also gone on to hards. Strikey's been on those hards for 4 laps now. Noah has got by, and Fantasy has got by Zoran as well, and Rio Harris. Both drivers have dropped back, and that is very unfortunate there. Rio Harris is actually 1.6 seconds behind. We're going to see Fantasy try and make a defend from Zoran, and Zoran goes up the inside, makes the move, but there's a bit of contact there as Fantasy goes slight half spins it, and that is very unlucky there from the Aston Martin. Gets a little bit of contact, and the tyres are not looking the most happy on that that Aston Martin, who's on 12 lap old hards, and they're not looking comfortable at this stage. They drop down to P9. We're going to continue on now with the battle for P5. Noah, who's already pitted. Zoran, who has just pitted. As 10-second time penalty for Vigo, who's gone into the pit lane. Sausage Joe's got a penalty as well of 3 seconds. Nelu Safu hasn't got a pen, but Vigo, crucially, a 10-second time penalty for our race leader. That has completely changed the complexion of this race. We're now going to see Noah try and defend from AMS Zoran, but on those tyres that are a couple laps older now, and Zoran, who has quite good pace, who flies by the Red Bull and moves up to P3 for now. P2 on track, but Vigo, who drops down to P5 now, has a 10-second time penalty. I'm not sure how 3 seconds for Rio Harris as well, and Sausage Joe. That is a couple contenders with early penalties as we go towards the halfway point of the race. But that is very much devastating for Vigo. Rio's got a pen, but he luckily has only 3 seconds. The extra 7 seconds is night and day difference between them, though. And unfortunately, that speeding in the pit lane cannot be overturned. That is just very, very unlucky there from the V car. We now go down to attack Millerale. Vigo leads Rio Harris and now tries to catch the Red Bull of Noah. But they continue on as they try and defend from Rio Harris. Vigo needs to now try and put the hammer down. They have that 10-second time penalty, which, unless there's a safety car, will hinder them severely by either by the race end, whether they have to serve it in a pit stop or whether they serve it at it gets added onto their race time. We don't know. Sausage Joe comes into the pit lane and this leaves Strikey 6.3 seconds clear of Zoran. Vigo will make the move by the Red Bull into P3, and leaves a gap between himself and Rio Harris. But Nelu Safu is 2.6 seconds off of Rio. That is quite a substantial gap there for the Ferrari. Rio makes a move. Oh, actually, what happened there with Noah? Noah's gone off the circuit. Noah goes completely off the circuit. And Rio goes up to P4. The Red Bull was miles off into the gravel. Not sure what happened there for the Red Bull team, Red Bull car, but unfortunately stopped them down to P6 and into the clutches of CWL Racing, who has a 3-second time penalty at this stage, is now right up the back of the Red Bull, who pitted 3 laps later. He's on the medium tyres compared to the hard, so that neutralises a bit more in terms of tyre degradation difference, but that medium will start to fall off sooner than the hard, and CWL will start to apply more and more pressure. As Vigo sets the fastest lap of the race, is 1.1 seconds behind Zoran, who is 5 seconds behind Strikey. Noah, though, is going to have to defend another position because CWL Racing is going to go flying by to the inside line of on the Red Bull and takes the position of P6 despite the pen. And Noah just starting to have the struggles on those mediums in comparison to their rivals. They will go on to the hards later on in the race, but whether the others stop, that is the crucial thing. Noah has a bit of damage as well, which is not going to be helping their performance, but they continue on, and it seems to not be affecting them too heavily. They believe that they need to pit and change the front wing. Meanwhile, Strikey is now losing about a second a lap to Zoran, who is really pushing the metal now. Strikey's 4-lap older hards are certainly starting to play a factor, but Zoran is having very, very good pace right now. As we are into the second half of the race, Strikey leads the way ahead of Zoran, Vigo, Rio Harris, Nelu Safu, CWL Racing, Noah, Sausage Joe, as Sausage Joe makes a move by Noah for P7 on the hards, but the field has certainly spread that little bit more out and is just calmed down. But it's certainly not over, because the gap between the top 3 is shrinking. Strikey is losing ground to Zoran, who's also losing ground to Vigo at this stage, and this is going to turn as the heat begins to turn up, as Vigo's 10-second is going to become a very, very big hampering to them later on in the race. With that in mind, we've got 11 drivers left running right now. Currently, Strikey, Zoran, Vigo, Rio Harris, Nelu Safi, CWL Racing, Sausage Joe, Noah, Fantasy, WL 9317, and Washed are leading the way. But and Washed are our top 11 reigning runners. Sorry, with Strikey leading the way, so that's what I was supposed to say. Ahead of Zoran, but that gap is shrinking. Vigo might be able to have something to say about that for now, while Fantasy will drop down the order with after having a yellow flag for a spin at Tosa, drops down to P10 as WL gets past them. Points are still on offer for those few drivers. We go down towards the Tosa hairpin for Vigo and Zoran. Vigo's all over the back of Zoran and looks to try and apply pressure on the Ferrari, potentially halt and stop the Ferrari from taking the race lead away from Strikey at this moment in time. That Vigo will be looking to try and get by Zoran and then pass Strikey and build that gap. We go up towards Variante Alta as everything is just a little bit calmer, but Zoran is losing ground to Vigo while gaining ground on Strikey. Is all this to play for as tyre strategy, and who's going to have the best strategy is going to be the crucial thing by the end of it. Wash has gone off at Ravat, so we just see there. Think they picked up some damage themselves now. And Fantasy not having the best of times. Meanwhile, here comes Vigo to the outside, goes to V-Carb and takes the position away from Zoran and takes P2 from the Ferrari, and now is going to go after their teammate and then build that 10-second gap in an attempt to save their race. They got, if they get a pit stop and have to serve it, they can at least know they can try and catch Zoran again, but it's going to be very difficult for the RB to get ahead of the pull clear of Zoran. Fantasy retires from the race in the pit lane. As we continue on, 1.8 seconds is now the gap between the two V-Carbs. Zoran just behind them. 3.5 back is Rio Harris, who's having to get a bit more defensive on from Nelu Safo. As we now see some fights really starting to close up. Strikey really losing pace now as that tyre wear begins to really hit Strikey. Now have to defend. Never mind, he doesn't have to defend because he comes into the pit lane and to serve his second stop of the race. This leads us with Vigo and Zoran to fight it out for the race lead now. But that 10-second again is going to be most crucial. He's not being unable to pull away from Zoran, but he has the opportunity now with a completely clean air to do so. We now continue down towards the Tosa hairpin, and three battles have emerged. AMS, the top two, the second row on the of Rio House and Nelo Safo and Sausage Joe and CWL Racing is our battles in our top 6 positions. Strikey is our battles of battle between the two race leaders and himself on strategy. And Strikey used the undercut to pull another bit of a gap as we go through the chicane. Zoran has got to be thinking he's got to try and pull clear now. Meanwhile, Rio Harris has gained another 3-second time penalty, who's catching being caught by Nelu Safo, is losing ground to the top two. The Alpine not as comfortable as what they were on the mediums in comparison with their current hard tyre pace, maybe trying to conserve the tyres if anything. But we go up towards the line and to start lap 21 of 32. This guy's not over because Nelu Safo is going to go to the outside to take the. It goes onto the grass there as he just about get by. Nelu Safo takes the position away from Rio Harris on track now. But Rio's not going to give this one up. He wants to try and fight this one to the bitter end. He's going to go through Villeneuve, right up the shaft of the Ferrari. Maybe look to have a move. There's a bit of carbon fibre flying out there from one of the drivers. But we continue on. As Nelu Safo takes P3 away from Rio Harris. We've got a 4.8 second gap to their teammate Zoran and Vigo in front. Rio at the moment, no. If he can stay within a 7-second margin of Vigo and potentially get ahead of Strikey maybe later on, they could see. Actually, no, it's not. It's a 3-second gap and a 4-second gap. Well, Rio's got another 3 second, 9 seconds for Rio. It's going from bad to worse for the Alpine as they continue to use track limits, almost on the same level as Vigo now. It has become very, very detrimental to Rio Harris's race. Meanwhile, the battle for the lead is continuing on Vigo. Zoran will fight, but Zoran doesn't have any penalty. Vigo does, as we continue on through the first chicane. Vigo with on lap 22 or 32 at the moment. The drivers are just in that rhythm, in that zone where they need to try and keep it in the white lines, and while some are doing that, some are not, and it is because, and this is where fatigue begins to set in for some drivers, because they are starting to think he's getting to that back into the race where they've had to do a lot of racing, and now it's starting to affect them as CWL Racing gets a 3-second time penalty. Positions gained from each of the drivers. CWL Racing has gained 8 positions, while WL has gained 3. 1 position gained from Vigo and Sausage Joe, while Zoran has lost 1, Strikey's lost 2, and Wash has lost 3. But the driver has still got about 10 laps to go in this race as Zoran gets on the DRS, gets on the power, trying to catch the RB of in front of him. He wants to try and get by. He wants to win this on track. At the end of the day, if you're the driver, you want to win a race on track. You don't want to win it on pens. You just want to have that clean slate at the end of the day, whether you're in the lead or not. But you do have to be careful of collisions, and because the drivers because you do not want to have contact with a driver that has penalty and ultimately cost you positions if you could have just taken the win on pens. So that is another factor that they have to play in the back of their minds. We go down towards Aquamilla Raleigh for the 23rd time this race. Vigo and Zoran just look to try and pull themselves away from the Cafu over Harris at this moment in time, and it is just a very difficult position for Nello Safi to be in, because at the moment that 3.9 second gap is not really shrinking, and with the drivers being so similarly paced, it's going to be very difficult for the Ferrari to reel in Zoran, who after both Ferraris on the same number of points are going to try and take as many points out of each other and pull a gap on each other, while also trying to pull themselves closer tonight. Zoran remains behind Vigo, because Vigo having that DRS off of the back marker, ultimately giving himself an extra lap in front. This must be getting frustrating though for Zoran, who is starting to get sick of seeing that rear end of that RB throughout this race. A 3-second time penalty for Sausage Joe, adding to his tally of making it now 6 seconds and putting him apart again with his closest race rival of CWL Racing, who is just sitting in the round 1 second window. After McLaren looks to try and catch Rio Harris, who's 4.5 seconds ahead. Currently, he needs to get within 3 seconds to get ahead of Rio Harris on pens, but it's a very tall order to do so. As we go down towards the final couple of corners, Zoran just biding his time at the moment as Vigo leads the way on track. My question is to these drivers: are they going to go to the end, or are they going to pit another time? With 7 laps left in this race, it's becoming less and less likely, unless they're going to go onto the soft tyres, they are going to pit. With how long this pit lane is, it is very difficult for them to do so, to make that comeback. Striker currently sitting a fair 12 seconds off of P6. That is and with them doing a 2-stop, it is starting to become a very, very difficult race. Currently, their gap to leader is 23 seconds. They're not really gaining on the race leaders at the moment. The best lap is a 16.6 as opposed to a 16.0 and a 16.4 from the 2 race leaders. Ostrich Joe also on a 16.6, as well as Noah. They're the only 5 drivers in the 1 minute 16s. But single fastest laps do not matter. It's about being consistently faster over the race period. As we now go down towards the end of lap 25 to start lap 26, Zoran is just got to try and start thinking about maybe whether they want to go for this win on track or win it on pens. Lap 26 of 32, these drivers' tyres are starting to become an issue for them at this stage. With 6 or 7 laps to go, it is going to become ever more apparent by lap 32 who has done their best when it comes to their tyres and who has done right by strategy. I think they, in terms of pushing and not, Zoran on the next lap higher than Vigo, but with that lap only being minimal in comparison to Hard, is that going to be the massive difference by the end of the race? Or will it be down to who's pushed their tyres that little bit more? Currently the gap's 6.5 tenths, moving up to 7 tenths by the time we get to the Variante outer chicane. But the RB is really pushing Zoran to fight for this. Even that 10-second time penalty, even though that 10-second time penalty will matter by the end of the race, at the moment it will drop them down to P3. It won't drop them any further due to penalties for Rio Harris, Sausage Joe and CWL Racing, but that penalty will become crucial later on. Let's actually have a look at the gap between the top 22-1. It's going to be Strikey just trying to reel in the 3 in front now and try and get in their penalty windows, but it's going to be very difficult to get inside Rio's by the end of it. Might get inside that 6-second window of Sausage Joe and CWL Racing, but it's still a bit of a tall order in the fight remaining laps with the remaining number of laps to go. Zoran is sticking with Vigo, but those tyres are going to start to hurt at this stage because being in the dirty air for a number of laps mean those tyres, you lose downforce. You start to push those tyres that little bit more, and at the moment it is starting to be it will start to become a significant issue, considering that he started on those tyres a lap or went on those tyres a lap earlier, and at the moment it is Zoran on the back foot in terms of tyres. Even if he wants to win on track, it's going to be a very difficult one. But that win, unless they get a significant penalty themselves, and a big oversteer there from Zoran, is not going to help them because they've hurt their tyres, because they don't want to lose too much pace and potentially fall into a significant error. As we now go down towards the first chicane, and everything has just settled at the moment. Meanwhile, Rio Harris is going to look to go for a move on Nelu Safu, not quite before the first chicane. Rio's doing very well and is starting to maybe come back at Nelu Safu in terms of pace, but that 9-second penalty is certainly going to have its effects. They luckily just probably keep P4 at the moment unless something severely goes wrong for Rio, but at this stage they just need to keep it calm and cool and collected. And hopefully for them, it just remains that way. They've just got to keep themselves in those white lines. That 6 seconds for Sausage Joe CWL Racing is not going to help them in their attack against Rio Harris as they begin to drop back now from the Alpine, who's putting pressure on the Ferrari of Nelu Safu in front as the race continues on. The gap between is now down to 20 seconds between Vigo and Strikey, but Strikey's still got another 10 seconds to make up, and he's not making that one up in the last couple of laps unless something significant happens. But the opportunity to get within that 6-second window of Sausage Joe and CWL Racing is still upon the horizon with just 4 laps to go. I want to say this race is the races start to wind down. The drivers are just putting in the laps, getting themselves lap after lap towards the end. That one stop has certainly worked for Vigo Zoran at the top 6 in comparison to Striker, who was on a 2-stop. The pace of the 2-stop not quite there today. 3-second time penalty for strikey though, and now that puts more pressure on the RB to try and catch the two in front, as now it is a 5.6 second gap they need to make up rather than just a 2.5, and that is costly for the RB, who could have got P5 and is now gonna maybe have just to deal with P7. Or going on to lap 30 or 32, it is 3 laps to go in this race for the drivers. Vigo leads Zoran, but 10-second time penalty is certainly going to cost them not just P1 but potentially P2. Meanwhile, Rio Harris is putting pressure on Nelly Safu despite having a 9-second penalty themselves. Or Sausage Joe and CWL Racing, P5 and P6 on the same number of penalties. That battle is at least going to be for position. As a battle out for P5, CWL Racing is stuck behind Sausage Joe for a number of laps, but has not been able to mount any sort of challenge against the McLaren driver. Strikey currently sits in P7, while Noah sits in P8. P9 is currently WL9317, while Wash, who is disconnected, is in P10. I'm not sure whether I was supposed to invite them or not. I don't think I've got a ping or anything, so we continue on. So now we're going to continue back to the race lead. We're going to go on to lap 31 or 32. Big oversteer there from Zoran on the exit. The tyres of the Ferrari potentially going, and that may let Nelu Safu come back into play, as Zoran is starting to struggle, but 2 laps to go. Nelu Safu needs a massive error there from his teammate to try and get back towards the front. Meanwhile, CWL Racing is really closing up now to Sausage Joe for the P5, and at the moment it is starting to really come down to who has kept the tyres in check between the two of them. But Sausage Joe manages to pull out in the first sector, but the Haas manages to keep in touch throughout the lap and use the DRS to close back in. But is that going to be enough heading on to the end of this lap and start of lap 32 to try and get DRS overtake later on? Meanwhile, Vigo is about to drop Zoran out of DRS. Zoran maybe just keeping it in there. Vigo trying everything in his power, but as we cross the DRS detection, note that delta time to Vigo is certainly not dropped over a second. So Zoran continues on as he got onto the final lap of the race. Vigo leads, but that 10-second looms further. And what could have been if Vigo didn't get that 10-second time penalty, as Zoran looks to just wheel it home now. Meanwhile, the battle for P5 is going to go side by side between CWL Racing and Sausage Joe. Sausage Joe can't do anything about it. CWL Racing uses DRS and flies by before the breaking point. The Haas moves up to P5. Are they able to hold on to it now against the P2 man standing? CWL Racing putting statement against the current P2 man of Sausage Joe, but at the moment the McLaren has got is going to lose position as CWL Racing and Sausage Joe go into each other. Sausage Joe goes into the back of CWL Racing, and there's a bit of contact there. I'm not sure if CWL Racing just slowed up that much more. The Sausage Joe carried a lot more speed in comparison, and that is luckily not ended either man's race. But we will go back to the front because we see Vigo 1.2 second gap over AMS Zoran, but Vigo with that 10-second time penalty will win it on track, but will not win it on penalties or on classification. Vigo comes lost the line in first, but AMS Zoran will win round 6 of the Division 2 championship and put themselves into a massively closer championship fight against their teammate and AMS Knight, as it's a 1-2 for the Scuderia. Zoran wins round 6 ahead of Nelu Safu, ahead of Vigo. Rio Harris comes home P4 with CWL Racing P5, half a second clear of Sausage Joe in 6th. Strikey comes home 7th, while Noah will come home 8th, 9th for WL 9317, and Washed, who we've disconnected, rounds out the top 10. Fantasy Meeks, Dion, Immortal Raider, and JJB51 are all out as our finishers, as our race results are there. The Zoran, in an excellent triumph, a consistent display, manages to come out on top and take the victory, as a Ferrari 1-2 certainly helps them in the Constructors' Championship. What a race from these drivers, and they all done very, very well. But with that in mind, it is now down to Zoran, who will be about, hold on, just trying to look at 24, 16, 11 points behind AMS Knight. 16 points behind will be Nello Sappho. Sausage Joe gains 8 points in the end. Is it 8 points? Sorry, hold on. It might be a little bit different. So 11 points. So 34 points, 23 points. 23 points cover the top 4 in the standings, but Zoran leads and takes the championship lead, as we now see. Zoran, race winner, fastest lap for Vigo, CWL Racing driver of the day. Most overtakes for Noah, police driver is Nello Sappho. Zoran, win, Nello, Vigo. Rio Harris, CWL Racing, Sausage Joe, Striking, Noah, WL9317 are top 9. Washed, finished 3 laps down and disconnected, while Fantasy Meeks, Dion, Immortal Raider, and JJB51 all did not finish. And besides the results quickly, and that is the race over. We will be back next week with round 7 in Belgium before we go on to a break week, and then Japan in round 8, and then Netherlands for our second sprint race of the season, before Vegas, Brazil, and Abu Dhabi to round out the 12-round season. We are now halfway through the season with 6 rounds left. It is still all to play for. 4 drivers, 23 points, and a championship